Hi guys, I'm so excited to share a weaving project with you today. We're going to take a look at how to do a very simple weaving at home that's very open-ended, and all you need is cardboard. This is just a piece of a box that I cut out, and then I used my scissors and I cut notches or slits at each end. And I cut 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at this end and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 at this end. So you want to do the same on both ends. This is going to be our loom, and the loom is what you weave on. Now a loom can be any shape. If you have been in the back of the art classroom, you know that we have the giant friendly loom that's literally the size of half of a wall. This is a smaller loom. A loom can be any size that you want. So if you want to do the exact same thing that we're going to do today, but on a larger piece of cardboard or a smaller piece of cardboard, you can. The technique is the same. What we're going to do is get some yarn, and the first thing we have to do is put the warp onto the loom, and the warp is the yarn that runs up and down the loom. So all I'm going to do is put this in a notch. If you want to tape that down, you can to hold it. You don't absolutely have to. It stays pretty well, but if you want to, just to be sure, you can. And I'm going to wrap it back and forth in each notch. I'm not going all the way around because that uses a lot of yarn. I'm just going to catch each notch on the back, go down to this one, catch it on the back, go back up, catch it on the back, until you have all of the notches filled. And this is called the warp. It's always the warp, whether it's on a giant loom or a small loom. The warp is always going to be the yarn that goes up and down. And we're already ready to weave. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get another piece of yarn. I don't want it to be too long because it tends to get tangled if you do that. So I'm doing it, I'm going to just see it's about maybe about one of my elbows. So if I'm holding it here, hopefully you can see that. Oh, there's my dog barking in the background. Elbow to my thumb and back. So roughly that size. I'm going to stick it in the notch. So I have the end that I've just cut, and I'm going to put it in that same notch where I started my warp. This is my weft, and all I'm going to do for my weft is I'm going to go over, under, over, under. So over, under. Doesn't matter which one you start with. It just has to be the opposite. Going to go all the way across, and I'm going to pull it. Okay, that's my first line. Now, one of the things that you don't want to do is you don't want to pull too tight. I don't want it to be like loosey-goosey like that, but I want it to be straight, but not pulling it tight. And here's the trickiest part, and once you get this, you've got it. My last place I was on this line was under my blue one, so I have to do the opposite when I'm going to go back. So because I was under, I'm going to go back going over. I'm taking my yarn, I'm going to go over, and then I'm going to go under this one, over, under, and pull. Sometimes I'll pause. I just use my fingers to pull it and straighten it up. Again, I'm not wanting to do this. If you can notice, I'm pulling really hard and it's pulling that last piece of warp. I don't want to do that. I want it to be kind of trying to keep it more like a rectangle. And so I'm just making sure I don't pull too tight. To my end, I went over this orange on the last, so now that I'm going to go back, I'm going to go under. So I'm going to go under that guy, over, under. Okay. Again, using my fingers to kind of straighten it. My last place I left off was under my blue, so when I go back, I'm going to go over my blue and then under my pink, over pink, under yellow, just like that, all the way to the end. Pulling, but not too tight. I'm over it, so now I'm going to go under it. And you just keep going back and forth this exact way until it fills up the cardboard. And you will be surprised at how quickly it goes once you get into a rhythm. Now, this artist was able to switch colors by adding some on. So one thing we should talk about is that when you are done with this piece of yarn is not going to last me for the entire loom. I'm going to run out of it. And the way that you add more yarn on is simply by taking another piece of yarn, The yarn I'm using happens to be multicolored because it's what I had at home. This is an artist that had these separate colors. So if you wanted to do something where you're deciding, like maybe you're a U of O fan and you want something green and yellow, if you have some green yarn and some yellow yarn, you can decide which sections you want to make those colors. I just know that I'm going to need more yarn, and all I'm going to do, friends, is I'm going to tie this onto my yarn. So this is the piece I cut. This is my piece that's on there, and I'm just going to tie it on. Now, sometimes I need, if you need another hand to do this, you need to make sure it's tight, because now all I've done is I've made this really long piece of yarn. You can go ahead and cut these little guys off now or at the end, whatever you want. And then I just continue weaving, okay, until I get to the end. Now, once your entire loom is filled up, you're ready to cut it off. And the way that you're going to do this, we've already started doing it, so I want to show you how to do it. You are going to cut 2 at a time the yarn that's on the back. So on the back of mine, I think I'll do it so I can show you this way. I'm going to cut it just like this. I go through this and through this. I don't want to do them all at once because that might make my weaving come out. Carefully, I'm going to pull this out. Pull this out. And all I'm going to do is tie it. Now, right now, it's a little bit loosey-goosey because I'm not all the way done with my weaving, but if I were, it wouldn't be so loose, but I can still tie it off. And what this does, once I tie it, it can't come unwoven. So I flip this back over. These other 2 that I cut, I'm going to pull those through and tie them. And what happens is, I'm going to pull this one off so you can see. What happens is, we've tied all of these off, so now not any of the weaving that you've done can come unwoven. You need to know that if you don't tie those off, if you don't pull them through and tie them, it can come unwoven, and then all your hard work would just be loose yarn, which you could always pull apart and reweave. But because you've worked so hard to do it, you want to make sure you're going to tie those off. So when you're done, you will tie it off on both ends. So I'm going to pull it off on one end, pull it off on the other end, tie them up, and then you end up with this beautiful weaving. Now, I've seen lots of different ideas that students have had for these pieces. Some people have made blankets for a stuffed animal, blankets for a guinea pig if you have one, or a hamster. The other thing I've seen students do, which is so clever, is that they'll make multiple pieces like this, so mini pieces, and then they'll either put them together and make like a little pouch, so like a little purse, or I had one student one year who took it home over a break and made a bunch of these, and then made almost like a small blanket that you could use for a baby. And what you're going to want to do is, if you're putting the pieces together, you just use more yarn and a needle and sew them together. You could also, if you don't have a needle at home, you could also use yarn that you push through just to tie them together. It's really open as to what you could do with this. But the wonderful thing about weaving is that once you have that over-under pattern down, that is weaving. So you could weave anything. You can do it with paper, you could do it with grass outside, you could do it with straw. The over under keeps all of the fibers together and makes it strong. It's one of the reasons weaving is such an important medium around the world, because it is useful for blankets and clothes. And so for thousands and thousands of years, cultures all over the world have been weaving in many different ways. It's one of the reasons I love it so much. So I hope you get a chance to try this. If you have any questions, let me know. Happy weaving. Thanks. Bye.